Hi everyone. Thank you. This is a moment with God. Welcome. If you're watching us and if you're listening to us, you listen on KN George podcast. You can find that podcast on Google, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Castbox, wherever you have access to a podcast, we are there. KN George podcast. And so welcome. So we are looking at heaven. We've been having this wonderful, lovely conversation about heaven. And you see, many people don't really believe in heaven. And especially in the Western world. In Africa, we all believe in heaven. Not all, many of us, majority of us in Africa believe in heaven. But most people in the Western world don't believe in heaven, they don't believe in God, they don't believe in hell, they don't believe in anything. In fact, most of them believe that when we die, we just get into a state of sleepiness or into a state of nothingness. And I don't believe that. I believe in the Bible. I believe that when we die, we go to heaven or we go to hell, depending on how you lived your life. So the question I have for you today is, have you ever experienced heaven? Have you ever experienced or met someone who has experienced heaven? Or are these vibes that we're talking about just vibes? Are they lies? And is heaven a lie? Okay. I believe that it exists because I believe in the Bible. I believe it exists because I've been there at least once in my life. And I've shared that, briefly in the first video. And you can listen to the video or watch it. And it will be a blessing to you. All right, so let's look at heaven again. Last week we covered how heaven will be like, the things we are to expect in heaven. And I said it's not just about singing and dancing and praising. That will be part of it. But there will also be part where Jesus will demand accountability. And you see now that part of accountability is not easy. The reason I'm saying that is because the world, generally, the way the world is, the way we human beings are, we are not very good when it comes to accountability. Have you ever tried to question, something in your organization that had to do with accountability? Maybe finances, maybe security. People don't really take accountability. They don't want to also give accountability. Some time back, I was having a conversation with someone, and we were talking about this organization in Kenya that is doing great work, very, very good work. But then there's someone who is the head of this organization, and they are not open. They are not becoming accountable. So they're not giving accountability, financial accountability, projections, and all these things. So they are a law unto themselves, this particular guy. And so, talking with this person, I began to realize how important it is to actually give accountability to the things that we do. And in heaven, there is a system of accountability that is covered in the book of Matthew. As we looked last week, 25, 14 to 30, it gives a very clear picture of how it will be in heaven. And so you have to always think about yourself. If you're a young person and you're in school and you're cheating on your exams, you will one day face Christ and you'll be accountable. If you're a corrupt officer, for example, let's say you have been put in charge of things like NHIF, National Health Insurance Fund in Kenya, and you're the one in charge of that. And maybe you're in charge of a few, some finances, and you get there and there's billions of money that you're supposed to control. And instead of you controlling this money, you end up, being corrupt and taking away some portion for yourself, for your children, for your relatives, and you spend money that is meant to cure sick people. And someone goes to hospital and they cannot be treated because they don't have insurance. The reason why the insurance can't cover them is because you stole money. You took money from NHIF and you spent it on a holiday in France or Paris or Bahamas or wherever. Or you bought some houses in Dubai for yourself, for your children. And because of that, some people die. People die because they couldn't be treated because NHIF has no funds, you will be judged harshly. It shall not end well with you. It shall not end well with your children and your children's children. And the judgment will not be postponed to your second generations. The judgment will begin with you. And even after being judged on this earth, you will still have or to give an accountability in heaven. Okay? So let me be very clear about these things. And let me use my nation as an example to the things that I'm talking about so that we are able to understand. There are two scenarios that I want to use to compare my point on accountability in heaven. There are two countries in the world. One of them is Kenya, my nation, and there's Singapore. Now, I've read a lot about Singapore. I love Singapore. It's an amazing country. And it's one of the leading countries, now the downside, leading countries in terms of depression. The country has everything they need economically, what they have, all the stuff. Thanks to one guy, Lee Kuan Yew. The guy who was prime minister for approximately, I think, 25 years. He was the first president, or the first prime minister, of Singapore. And he made sure that he created rules and laws that were to be followed. And some of those things that he did, you can read them in his book, where he has outlined the strategies and the things that they did. The book is called From Third World to First, the story of Singapore. So this guy gains independence, and Singapore was so poor that Malaysia wanted to buy it. They actually had an offer on the table. And it was like if Singapore doesn't accept the offer, Malaysia would attack. And so Lee Kuan Yew becomes prime minister, and very quickly he had nothing. He just had to do a few things here and there. He had only 1,000 people in the army. And so he appeals to the British to come and protect him. And that's a long story, and I want to go to that. Quick forward, 25 years later, Singapore is a first world country, no debt, zero debt, and brilliant nation and growing. And today, 2024, Singapore is one of the best nations in the world economically, in terms of security. It's brilliant. Kenya gained independence in 1963 at the same time, almost at a similar time with Singapore. Now, Singapore was poorer than Kenya in 1963. Kenya was at a nice place. Kenya was poised to be one of the leading African countries. It was a leading light of the countries that were getting the independence at that time. Because if you understand history, especially African history and colonialism, Africa was receiving, many nations in Africa got their independence between 1957, being led by Ghana, and 1965, majority of African countries. And at the same time, Singapore got the independence from the British. And so Kenya begins and starts out strong, and they have Jomo Kenyatta as president. The guy rules for 15 years and gives it to Daniel Moi, who rules for another 24 years. So that's approximately a combination of like 39 years in power. Two people. Singapore had one guy, 25 years. He moved that country from a third world to a first world. Jomo Kenyatta ruled 15 years. His rule was not very nice. It didn't go to the way it was supposed to be. And you can read a book on that, or you can read your history. Kenya Between Hope and Despair. Brilliant book that outlines the historical problems. Like we've seen, the historical injustices about land issues and all these issues that began in Jomo Kenyatta's presidency. The reason why that began was because of land. When the colonialists returned land to the government, Jomo did not distribute land equally back to the owners, to the original owners, but instead he gave it to his guys, the Bio Koinanges and Gishurus and all these people. They're the ones who actually benefited from huge land parcels in Kenya. Then comes Daniel Moi. Daniel Moi was a Christian, confessed Christian, brilliant guy. But he rules for 24 years, and instead of building Kenya, he destroys the nation, man. He destroys it completely. By the time we come to 2002, Kenya was having an economy that was on a negative percent. Kibaki takes over and does what he can with what he had, and Uhuru Kenyatta, and the rest is history. But this is my point. Specifically on Daniel Moi, who was a Christian. He had 24 years to govern Kenya. Lee Kuan Yew had 25 years to govern Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew moved Singapore from third world to first. Daniel Moi, combination with Jomo Kenyatta, moved Kenya from growing upward to going downward, such that some of the things we are doing right now as a nation would have been done those years. If, for example, Jomo Kenyatta built roads in Kenya, or maybe let's say, maybe those days the population was not so big, so maybe we didn't need roads. But if he secured things like agriculture and gave back land to the people who originally owned this land, and set up rules and laws and destroyed corruption and all these things, Daniel Moi would have taken up a better government. And maybe he also should have done better, should have created, built roads and designs and all these things. And today, in 2024, we would not be talking about roads and electricity and coverage on hospitals and all those things. We would be done with that. We would be thinking of other things. So today, if Daniel Moi and Lee Kuan Yew are standing before God together, what kind of judgment do you think they would receive? If Lee Kuan Yew was a born-again Christian and President Moi was a born-again Christian, and they stand before God, and Lee Kuan Yew would get more rewards than Daniel would, because Lee Kuan Yew, his works can be seen. He was concerned about the people. He built an economy that couldn't be built, and he built it. Daniel Moi, on the other hand, with Jomo Kenyatta, they would be judged because of what they did to this country. Will they still be in heaven? Yeah. I mean, like, they believe in Jesus, they trust in him, but they would lose their rewards. Okay? Same thing with different nations. You take your nation, put whoever you want there, but accountability will be one of the key things in heaven. People are going to have to give accountability to two things: the words they speak and the works they do, or the things they do. We will have to give an accountability in heaven. So, in addition to singing forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, we will also have to stand before God and say, okay, God, you gave me 70 years, you gave me 90 years, you gave me 100 years of my life. And in these 100 years, this is what I did for you. This is what I did for the kingdom. Okay? You're a young man, you're a young woman, and you are there, and you're being tempted by different things, and you will give an account to that. And you'll say, okay, God, you gave me this youthful age, and this is what I did with my youth or with my young age. You're an older person, you are in your 60s, 70s, and you will have to stand before God and give an account. You see, the issue is this, and this is where I think many Christians go wrong. Because this guy I was listening to some time back, we were just having a conversation, but then I couldn't respond much because I didn't know him well. And he was talking about the importance of leaving a legacy. And it's not bad to leave a legacy. And he was talking about how will you be remembered when you leave earth, when you go to heaven, or when you go to hell, whatever it is. How will you be remembered? Now, and the issue for me is not really how people remember you. It is how you are received in the other side of life. So it's not how you're remembered on this side of life when you go. It's about how you get received on the other side of life. That is so critical and more important. It gives you more focus because, living your purpose is not about earth. It is all about heaven. Fulfilling and being nice and being kind and fulfilling your God-given call is not about earth. It is all about heaven. Okay? Sponsoring kids and going to visit children's home and living a legacy on earth and being kind, being nice, and if you're a president, building roads and all that is not about earth. It's about heaven. And you see now in Kenya, for example, we have a president who is born again, and not just born again. It's not just a Christian president. We have a born again, Pentecostal, spirit-filled, tongue-speaking president, and that doesn't happen a lot in many nations because such people don't get too high. They don't go too high in this power stuff. Okay, the Catholics do it, the secular people do it, but Christians, tongue-talking, spirit-filled Christians don't really rise that high. And so we have a president, and there are many people who are criticizing this guy and this president. And I think he's brilliant. I think he's good. I think he knows what he wants and what he wants to do. But the question is, will he manage to do it? Will he have the strength to do it? Who will be his encouragement to do good for the nation of Kenya? But by the time his term is coming to an end, will he look back and say, I have done well? By the time he stands before God, will you, Mr. President, say, I have done well? Will heaven say, welcome, good and faithful servant? Or will heaven be like, not again, not again? These are questions we have to ask ourselves. So even the president should know that what he's doing on earth in Kenya is not really for Kenya. It is for heaven. For him, he shall give an account to heaven. Same thing with preachers, okay? You're a preacher, you're a powerhouse. And when you pray, the heavens come down and healings begin to happen and all these wonderful things happen. But then the question is not the impact you're having here on earth. The question is, what will be his words to you when you make your first step into heaven? What will Jesus say first when he sees you in heaven? Will he say, welcome? Or will he be like, okay, you've made it. Congratulations. What will heaven say about you? It's all about accountability. And so when we talk about accountability, I want us to look at a scripture here that is so interesting. It's in Matthew 6, 19 to 21. Matthew 6, 19 to 21. And verse 19 says, do not gather and heap up and store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust and worm consume and destroy, and where thieves break through and steal. Oh my goodness, wait. Isn't this the same Bible that says we ought to prosper? Isn't this the same verse that says all things are possible to them who believe? Isn't this the same Bible that tells us, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened? Yet the same Bible, the same Jesus is saying, do not gather and heap up and store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Meaning, everything you do or whatever it is that you do is not for earth. It's not really for you on earth. It's for heaven. Okay? Now, this doesn't disqualify us from being rich. Everyone wants to be rich, but be rich in the right way. But this does not disqualify you from getting properties, from starting a successful business. It doesn't disqualify us from having influence, desiring greatness. it doesn't really disqualify us from achieving the things that you really want to achieve in life. So this doesn't mean that you shouldn't drive a nice car or live in a nice house. No. Okay? By all means, if you can, go for it. Live in a nice house. This simply says that as much as you may want to drive a nice car and have wonderful investments that are giving you a wonderful return, it also talks about this and says, as much as you do that, remember that this kind of investments on earth, the houses and the cars and the food and the wonderful stuff, there is moth and rust and worm that can consume these things and destroy, and there are thieves who can break through and steal these things. There's this story I watched some time back in the news about Karen. Now, Kenyans, Karen, and it used to belong to this lady who was called Karen Blixen, and she was given that land by Senior Chief Kinyanjui Gathirimo. He gave her that land as part of a colonial agreement. Because when the colonialists came to Kenya, they either killed the senior chiefs or they made a deal with them. And so Kinyanjui Gathirimo decided to make a deal, and Karen Blixen was given that whole portion where she grew, I think, coffee and tea and all these things. And today you can go to the museum in Karen. It's a beautiful place. Now, Karen is generally mostly owned by the Catholic Church and also a lot of individuals who are very rich. In Kenya, it's one of those rich places, those places where the really, really rich live. And so this is what has been happening, and this is what I saw on the news. There was these guys who came to a particular land. I think it was a prime land, and it was, costing a lot of millions, because land in Karen goes into millions of shillings. So these guys come and they drive into this wonderful environment of Karen, and then they begin to claim that this land is theirs. And the owner, the person who's been living there, comes out and begins to fight them and saying he's lived in that land for over 50 years. It's been his land for all this time. And so, but these guys are adamant and they say, no, this is our land. And so they go to court, and there's a lot of, back and forth. And I don't know whether the judges were bribed or there was something that was going on. But the eventual judgment is that the land actually belongs to these guys, these conmen. And so the residents around that place, they rise up in arms and they say, no, we do not know these guys, but we know this one owner. And so the residents of that area take the case back to the court, and now it's a whole drama. In other words, my point is this. I'm just trying to emphasize the point that Jesus made, where thieves break through and steal. We have had cases in our television network some time back about houses in Westlands. Okay, Westlands is another place in Kenya where the leases of the original owners are coming to an end, and the county government a few years back refused to renew the leases. Okay, and so because they refuse to renew the leases, it means that the owners must be kicked out. Now, when I say leases, this is what I mean. Many years back, the colonial government gave a few people from the Hindu community leases that will go to around 99 years. And so those leases happen to be expiring a few years back. And so when a lease expires, you go and renew it. But then there's these corrupt guys in a few places who refuse to renew the lease so that they can take those houses for themselves. Very interesting. Where thieves break through and steal. You see, there is no security really on this earth. Let's talk about even political instability. When you have treasures on this earth and you've hoarded a lot of treasure, and then you begin to experience your nation begins to have instability, and before you know it, it's gone. Okay, maybe that is far-fetched. Let's talk about people grabbing land and then selling it to you, and you become the fourth, the fifth buyer of that land. You have no idea of the history. And when you have established yourself, build your houses and your home, the government says, okay, we are taking back our land, and all your houses, all your investments are flattened, and you're not paid back because that was grabbed land. We've seen these things happen. Okay? So what I'm talking about is, though you may be rich, though you may have a lot of properties on earth, Jesus is saying, do not gather and heap up and store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Because on this earth, where moth and rust and worm consume and destroy, and where thieves break through and steal. Is that clear? Okay, then he says, but gather and heap up and store for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust nor worm can consume and destroy, and where thieves do not break through and steal. In other words, the problems that you have on earth will not be in heaven. There won't be cartels in heaven that will try to take away your treasures or your land or your properties in heaven. Do you know that we will have properties in heaven? We will have land in heaven. I believe that everything we have on this side of the world, we will have it in heaven, in the absence of sin or in the absence of fall. Okay? We will have restaurants and cafes. I believe it. We'll have, just imagine yourself taking the best coffee that you've ever taken, because this is the coffee of heaven. The best tea, the best chocolate. My goodness. Imagine taking the best banana, the best mango, because it is in heaven, and it's in perfect glory. The fruits of the Garden of Eden. Just imagine that. And so, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So Jesus is saying that if you have treasures on this earth, your heart will be tied to this earth. But if you have treasures in heaven, your heart will be tied to heaven. If you have treasures on this earth, Jesus is saying, you will be desiring the things of this earth. But if you have treasures in heaven, you'll be desiring heaven. Like, it just blows my mind to think about this and to think about the heaven that we will be experiencing, my friends. So this let me give you a final example as I conclude on this particular conversation about heaven. Imagine Nairobi. Imagine Nairobi. Take Nairobi, for example. For those of you who've been in Nairobi, it's a beautiful city, but it's divided into, there's this side that is very nice, very calm, very quiet. Then there's the other side that is crazy with everything and everyone. Okay? That's Nairobi for you. So we see the photos of the wonderful side, but we don't really see the photos of the other side. But there's the crazy side of Nairobi. Every city is like that. New York, Chicago, whatever. All cities have two sides. And so Nairobi has two sides. So take Nairobi and imagine the most perfect Nairobi. Imagine a totally clean Nairobi, totally perfect, no thugs, no thieves, no nudity, a perfect city. Just take it as it is and clean it up in your mind and make it as perfect as you possibly can. And my challenge to you is, it doesn't matter how clean you make Nairobi, even your mind cannot conceive how Nairobi in heaven will be like. Let's continue this conversation the coming week. God bless you.